when another person was mistaken for a criminal. Story 1. My baby was 3 weeks old. I was lying in bed and he was in his crib. I heard a knock on the door and shouts of, "Police!" I thought our friends were coming back from a bar and decided to spend the night at our place. They had done this before, introducing themselves as the police. But they knew I had just given birth, so I didn't go to answer the door, thinking they would find another place to stay. But suddenly the door was broken down, several policemen burst in and started searching the house. They woke up my husband, who was sleeping in his office. Then they stopped, said they had the wrong address. They apologized and left. A few days later they sent a worker who installed a new door. Story 2. I went with my partner to the prosecutor's office to pick up a suspect for questioning. The duty officer at the prosecutor's office handed the man over to us. We put him in the car and drove him to the station. I said that they would arrest him now, then interrogate him and take him to court, and there they would decide whether to keep him in prison or release him on bail. It was a serious matter, attempted murder. The guy grinned and said that he was arrested for shoplifting. A few minutes later, the duty officer from the prosecutor's office called and said that he had given us the wrong man, because he had two with the same first and last names. We had to go back. Story 3. I worked in the police for 25 years, and I have 2 such stories. I was given a warrant for the arrest of a man. Red-haired, tall, with a beard. I went to the address and saw that a man with such description was mowing his lawn. I said that I had a warrant for his arrest, and I needed to go to prison. I put on handcuffs, and we went. The prison did not accept him, because his last name was Robinson, and the warrant was issued for Robertson. I had to apologize, write out a new warrant and go after the real criminal. He lived at the same address, and the 2 of them rented this house. Both red-haired, tall, bearded, but not related. In the second case, I was arrested by mistake. I turned off my shift and was driving home at 2 a.m. I see a patrol car pull up behind me, then 3 more at once. They turned on their flashing lights at once, boxed me in, blocked me and stopped me. I even became curious about what would happen. They started to act according to protocol. I followed all their demands. In the end, they ordered me to get out of the car. I got out, and they saw a police uniform on me. 3 of them immediately went to their cars and drove away, and the 4th said that they received a description of the criminal's car on the radio, which was exactly like mine. There was a robbery with a shootout, and I was driving near this place, and they decided that I was one of the criminals. Story 4. A similar story happened to my mother. On America's Most Wanted, they showed a woman who looks exactly like my mother, and has the same name. On a Saturday night, my mother was sitting in her house reading a book. She lived alone. The police came and arrested her. My mother tried to explain that they were mistaken, but they didn't listen to her. In the end, it turned out that the real criminal stole my mother's social security number, and pretended to be my mother everywhere. My mother spent 2 weeks in jail. She was released when her fingerprints were taken and they didn't match those found at the crime scene. And so my mother faced life in prison. Story 5. There had been 7 home burglaries in our neighborhood in 2 weeks, and everyone was on edge. I was 8 years old and home alone that night. I heard our dog whining in the yard, so I went out to check on him. But my dad had set the house alarm, and it sent a signal to the police station. The alarm was silent, and I had no idea it was there and had gone off. Literally 10 minutes later, someone was knocking on the door, but my parents forbade me to open the door, so I didn't. Then the door was broken down, and the cops burst into the house. For some reason, they decided that they had caught the burglars, and more police cars started pulling up to our house. When they went through the house, they found only me, crying, and no one else. And those burglars were caught a week later. Story 6. I live in rural England, and our town often sends young police officers for training. My friends and I, all teenagers, went to the supermarket in the evening, because what else was there to do in the boondocks, and there was no internet back then. Suddenly, a police car screeched to a halt right in front of us. A young cop, about 5 years older than us, jumped out of the car and started giving us a full dressing down, asking what we had been doing for the last hour. He was with our policeman, who later also got out of the car and told us not to worry. There had been a report of a burglary, but we didn't match even the preliminary description. They let us go. Story 7. My friend and I were sitting in a small bar with live music. We stayed for about an hour and a half and then went home. A couple of miles later, the police stopped us, for cars at once. I saw that the cops were nervous, so I did everything they told me. It turned out that there had been a series of kidnappings of women in this area, who were returning from this bar and getting into strangers' cars. After a while, they returned our documents and said that we matched the description of the criminals, but it wasn't us. I don't know how they figured that out. They let us go. And only later did it dawn on me that it could have ended much worse. Story 8. My car was stolen and I went to investigate. I see a car in front of me. The make matches, the color matches, the number matches. I stop it, walk up to it, and see my friend with his family. Then I look closely at the number and see that one letter doesn't match. I turned it all into a joke and drove on. Later that evening we had dinner together, and I told him how I mistook his car for a stolen one. Story 9. I often travel from the US to Canada and back. Sometimes I use the bus. One day, all the passengers were forced to wait for a woman who was taken away by the cops for questioning. She returned an hour later and said that there was a person with the same name on the most wanted list, only he was a white man, 160 centimeters tall, and she was a black woman, 190 centimeters tall. It took the police an hour to realize that they had the wrong person. What's not as great as it seems at first glance? Story 1. A job where you have to travel a lot. At first it seems cool, and you can see a lot of new places for free. But this lifestyle has a lot of negative consequences. You lose social connections, because you rarely see your family and friends. You are rarely home, and you quickly get tired of sleeping in a new place every night. I traveled for 19 years. After a while, all the hotel rooms start to look the same, and I could not sleep well in any of them. We worked with Microsoft, Google, Hewlett-Packard and other giants. I ate in expensive restaurants and stayed in luxury hotels. I missed out on a lot of time that I could have spent with my wife and kids. I am a travel expert who never wants to leave home again. Story 2. The ability to not work is only possible if you are not a very rich person who can really afford everything. But otherwise, not having a job is soul-crushing, and it becomes as lousy as the most shitty job. Yes, you have a lot of free time, but it is not as glamorous as it seems. A person needs to do at least something. Story 3. Having big dick. Every man thinks it's cool, but it's a nightmare. In the communal showers at the gym or the pool, everyone stares at you. You start to feel like an ugly person. Women are afraid to start a relationship with you because they think it will hurt them. And others start stalking you, even despite the restraining order. It's hard for you to find pants, shorts, underwear that are comfortable to wear. My wife's friends have asked to see it several times. Seriously? My friends also asked to see it, like as a joke. And it's all very awkward. It's better to have a regular average size. Story 4. Working from home. I have been working remotely for almost 10 years. Yes, there are some advantages, but I really miss my office mates. And there is no feeling of relief when you come home in the evening, especially on Fridays. When you work from home, every day is the same. And I miss the commute. I have always used public transport, and it gave me an excuse to read books. But at home, I never have the desire to read. Story 5. Owning expensive things like a swimming pool, a yacht or a mobile home. They cost a lot of money to maintain. Plus, when you own something like that, you feel obligated to use it, which quickly becomes boring. Are you planning to buy a yacht? Rent one for a couple of months first to see if you really need it. Story 6. Driving. As a kid, I couldn't wait to get my license and start driving, but now I hate it. Traffic jams, teapots, pedestrians jumping out in front of the wheels. Too much stress. If I could drive on an empty highway with no other cars or cops, I'd love it, but driving in the city is a no-no. Story 7. Chocolate fountains. I hate being put in charge of one at a wedding or similar event. They are so hard to fill and even harder to clean. And parents let their kids put their dirty hands in them. I often see these little rascals throwing bits of food into the fountain. Story 8. Nightclubs. You pay for entry, then wait 10 minutes in line at the bar to buy a drink at a price 5 times higher. Horrible music blares so loudly that it is impossible to have a conversation. And constant fear for drunk friends that they will start a fight and there will be problems with security and the police. Story 9. League of Legends is like alcoholism. You get into it because your friends tell you it's great. Then you start liking it. It becomes a refuge where you spend your time and money. Eventually, you quit and think, never again. But then Rapid Fire comes out, and then a new version. And then something else, and each time you find excuses to come back. Even after you finally quit, you'll look back with nostalgia on the days when you played with friends and fight the temptation to start playing again.